There's this video I saw on my recommended page, and I don't know if it's not a very good video, I guess.
This is a video I thought and hoped that I would never have to make, but unfortunately I'm afraid I have to. One of my all-time atheist heroes, Alex O'Connor, has fallen. He no longer is a clear proponent of atheism, but instead he more and more seems to be arguing against atheistic arguments. For the past 2 years I've seen a gradual change in the way Alex reasons about atheism and religion. But one of his latest videos very clearly marks his departure from atheism. The video I'm talking about is called Atheist Slogans You Should Stop Using. Yes, that's really the title of the video. He now degraded atheist arguments to slogans.
Well, yeah, because they are slogans. Actual arguments would be like the problem of evil or divine hiddenness.
Tour dates are on screen. The link to buy tickets is in the description, and I hope to see you there.
Well, this is how Alex opens almost all of his videos these days. Apparently, Alex is making money by going on tour, selling thousands of tickets for £30 each. And of course, it would be a shame if his tour would fail, because he would only sell half the tickets. So, from a commercial point of view, it makes sense for Alex to prioritize income over principles, to take a bit of a blurry position on religion, so that he also sells tickets to the religious crowd in the UK. Just speculating here, of course. Maybe, again, just speculating here, Alex is thinking of a tour in the USA, because that is where the real money is. If that were to be the case, we can expect to see Alex moving away from atheism even more the coming year, so that he can 10x his ticket sales. Just an idea, just speculating here. But let's keep that speculation in mind. We'll get back to it later in the video.
I don't believe in God. I think you don't believe in God, at least.
Maybe, just speculating here, people sometimes change their opinions on things based on new evidence they have.
A good segue into our second and perhaps more interesting claim, which is this. There is no evidence for God. There is no evidence for God. As Hitchens says, religion provides nothing. People say this all the time. Like when you ask people online, like, why are you an atheist? What's your evidence for atheism? They say it's not really like that. It's more that there's no evidence for the thing that you're claiming. Do you think that's true?
Well, you weren't asking me, but since I'm sitting behind a microphone as well, yeah, that's basically true. The supposed evidence and arguments that theists have been presenting us for the past thousands of years in order to prove the existence of any God are all meaningless nonsense that proves nothing other than that bad arguments exist. The things they call evidence consist of such poor and useless material that I don't think it deserves the label evidence. It's just stuff they say. Most of it, if not all their supposed evidence and arguments, have been debunked the crap out 1,000 times here on YouTube by many, many atheists, including yourself, Alex.
Like what? Later in the video, he talks about fine-tuning a little bit, but he doesn't really address any of these other arguments. He just says they're debunked. Like,
Many atheists, including yourself, Alex.
What's your evidence for atheism? They say it's not really like that. It's more that there's no evidence for the thing that you're claiming. Do you think that's true?
No. So, what is evidence? Evidence, at least as lots of philosophers understand it, is some piece of information that raises the probability of a hypothesis.
Something that raises the probability of a hypothesis, okay? For now, I will consider that to be a fair assessment of what evidence is. But of course, it very much depends on how you apply this principle. The point is, if you commit to this definition of evidence, you also commit yourself to probability calculations of some sort. Yes, probability is a game of numbers. It's math. If I claim that the probability of A is bigger than the probability of B, I somehow need to produce the result of some sort of probability calculation that demonstrates that the odds of A are now bigger than the odds of B. If I do not produce some sort of probability calculation, then I basically failed to demonstrate my claim. The problem here is that the vast majority of theistic arguments and supposed evidence does not succeed in doing this, or even tries to. So if you choose this route of evidence is something that raises the probability of something, which I'm basically fine with, you do dismiss the vast majority of all theistic arguments and supposed evidence, even before we start contemplating this idea. But please continue.
Evidence is information that raises the probability of a hypothesis.
you can't really do probability calculations on philosophical arguments. I mean, you can't really, how do you calculate how much the exact number an argument makes a theory probable? It doesn't really work like that. But also, what do you mean arguments don't try to have probability calculations? Arguments don't have probability calculations in them. If someone wants to do a probability calculation of fine-tuning, they can. But the fine-tuning argument doesn't have a probability calculation premise in it, because that's not how arguments work. I guess you could say atheist arguments don't have probability calculations in them. Almost no argument has a probability calculation in it, because that's not a thing that arguments have I mean, there's Bayes' theorem, and you can do probability calculations with that. It's not an exact number because that's not how arguments work. But yeah, you can do a Bayes theorem on arguments, but you can do that with any argument. So there's no theistic argument you can't do like a Bayes probability on.
Then, I don't know, maybe there would be some geopolitical influence, like the government would start focusing on that and things would start going badly elsewhere. And look, like, the government is shutting down or whatever, and therefore I've got this evidence of alien abductions. In theory, that evidence is kind of predicted on my hypothesis, and that evidence is, forthcoming, but it would seem a little bit too loose to say that counts as evidence for alien abductions. Oh, why not? I mean, it's just weak evidence, right? And it's evidence that's significantly overcome by countervailing evidence, right? So I don't know, I don't really feel the intuitive pull of saying that that's no evidence whatsoever, because after all, the hypothesis is boosted by it.
So, just to be clear, Joe Schmidt, a Princeton PhD student in philosophy, is
Stating here that a government shutting down is evidence for alien abduction. He admits it's very bad evidence nonetheless. He is prepared to label this as evidence. I don't know if his education also includes media psychology, but know that as of now, for years to come, especially after Joe will have obtained his PhD, alien abduction folks will say there is evidence for alien abduction, according to Princeton PhD Joe Schmidt. So, nice. But to elaborate a bit more on this approach of what evidence supposedly is, imagine my hypothesis, and I think we're using the word hypothesis rather loosely here, but to stick to that wording, imagine my hypothesis is that vampires exist and they want to create chaos.
He talks about this for several minutes. His entire point is just that that the government shutting down is bad evidence because it can be used in multiple theories and it doesn't prove anything, which is true. That's why they said it was bad evidence. The whole point was just to get an understanding of what evidence is, not to argue anything about alien abduction or why it's bad. They already know that it's bad evidence. You have to provide examples showing why it's bad evidence. What exactly do you think the definition of evidence is? I mean, what is your what is your definition of evidence? If you have a better definition of evidence, then why didn't you just say it?
so that they can take over society. Is then a government shutdown also evidence for the existence of vampires? Yeah, it's just bad evidence, but still it's evidence. Really? Is that how you suppose that science should look at evidence? Because that seems rather problematic.
They're not talking about science, they're talking about philosophy.
How about my hypothesis being the opposite of yours? Aliens do not exist. They are not visiting us, because if they were able to reach us in the first place, they would be much more intelligent and capable than we are, so they would not have to bother with nonsense like shutting down the government. They would just zap us into oblivion by pushing a button. So in that hypothesis, as long as governments are shutting down, we can be pretty sure that we're not visited by aliens. So we then would label a government shutdown as evidence. It turns out to be evidence for both aliens visiting us and aliens not visiting us at the same time. Again, a rather problematic situation that arises from the way Joe is dealing with evidence here. And whatever happened to probability? How did you determine or calculate that your hypothesis got more likely in any way? You haven't shown any of that, so no. I think Joe is far too generous in labeling stuff as evidence. I think we should raise the bar much, much higher before labeling stuff that people say as evidence.
Okay, well then what's your definition of evidence? Also, what do you mean what people say? Like testimony? You don't think testimony is evidence? Or do you mean like what people say without knowing? Like people just speculating? Because you didn't make that clear.
I mean, listen, there are philosophical challenges to this. I recognize that. But I would just want to diffuse those intuitions by saying, I don't think it concludes evidence. I don't think the evidence is sufficient to believe the claim in question or the hypothesis in question. I'm only saying that is at least some potentially weak evidence in favor of the hypothesis. Is at least some reason to think that the hypothesis is true. Maybe it's overwhelmingly weak reason. Maybe it only boosts the probability of the hypothesis from 1 trillion to 1 in a billion.
Well, that's the first case in this video, in which Joe mentions a number, a probability number in this video, and it's rather odd. In this example, the odds have increased from 1 in a trillion to 1 in a billion. Joe just increased the probability by magnitude 1,000. I don't think that is what he aimed for. But this is just an example, of course, and not an actual calculation. But it kind of shows that probability calculation is paramount if you want to claim that something is more or less probable than something else. And again, the vast majority of arguments for the existence of God doesn't even attempt this, and therefore can basically be dismissed as evidence according to Joe's own definition of evidence. Now,
And what do you mean? Probabilities. Anyone can use an argument to establish like a probability. Like sure, they can't use an exact number, but like what do you mean arguments don't attempt to have a probability
Now,
calculation?
this video may have looked as a reasonable and nuanced exchange of ideas. Some of those ideas perhaps a bit naive, but so far we can't really accuse Alex or Joe leaning towards the theistic side. But as they are closing in on drawing a conclusion regarding this topic, that is all going to change. Listen to this.
Like, I really have come across people who are like, no evidence. And, it's like that video, no pomegranates. And they just keep on screaming, no. I don't want to see it anywhere. So I think some people really are like that. In fact, many people. But the more reasonable people will grant that, okay, maybe there's like, slight evidence or weak evidence, but no sufficient evidence or no evidence to compel belief or something like that.
That certainly was not the strongest part of Joe's explanation, making people whose position it is that there is no evidence for the existence of gods look like whining and yelling kids, and then a follow-up that looks like a no true Scotsman fallacy. Anyone who disagrees is not reasonable.
Yeah, when someone says something unreasonable, it makes them not reasonable. How is that no true Scotsman? That's just a fact. If I say the sky is green and someone calls me unreasonable, can I just say, oh, that's no true Scotsman because you said I was unreasonable?
Numbers move.
I think that there's like non-trivial evidence. There's like substantive evidence to make theism a live possibility to people. I certainly don't claim that, oh goodness, wow, where to start? Well, I mean, we could talk about, fine-tuning, we could talk about contingency arguments, we could talk about arguments from consciousness. It just turns out
So
that
you're talking
there
about the typical sort of arguments for God's existence,
right?
Count as evidence.
This is a unique sighting. Two self-proclaimed atheists, summing up all these wonderful theistic arguments, giving those arguments credit. So, what are we doing here?
I've sometimes said that,
Alex?
but having said that, with something like fine-tuning, when we've got like a bit of a stalemate, all of the constants of the universe, the strength of gravity and stuff, they're so finely balanced that it can't be down to chance. In saying that, fine-tuning is evidence for God, the instant response from an atheist, I think reasonably, is to say, no, there are lots of other explanations for this. There could be a multiverse, there could be some necessary reason for the concept.
And of course, fine-tuning rubbish. Again. No, Alex, there is no stalemate. I think the atheistic response to the fine-tuning argument could, or perhaps should be, that the whole idea of fine-tuning is circular reasoning. It's nonsense. You first need to presuppose the existence of a God so that you can rule out chance as an explanation, so that you can conclude we now only have two options. Either a God did it, or there is some kind of necessity.
I mean, most people usually rule out necessity first. They don't just rule out chance because God exists, so that it can't be chance. That's not what people usually say.
Which leads to your supposed stalemate. However, the physical constants of the universe can actually be explained by chance. You, however, automatically dismiss chance as an explanation. Most people who dismiss chance as an explanation for this supposed fine-tuning treat their chance assessment as if we were there when the physical constants were about to get their values, and we made a prediction about it. Well, of course, it would be very remarkable if that prediction then would become true. But that's not what we're dealing with here. We were not there when the values of the physical constants were set. We're just confronted with the outcome of these physical constants, and that current outcome had the exact same odds as any other outcome. So, no matter the outcome, any outcome would always have an astronomically small probability, which makes every outcome equally likely, and therefore every outcome can be perfectly explained by chance, which totally undermines the entire idea of the fine-tuning argument.
So if the stars spelled out the phrase God exists in every language, would that be evidence for God? Because you could use the same logic here. You could say, oh, well, it's not evidence because the stars could be arranged in any way. Any way the stars are arranged are all equally likely. So no matter which way they're arranged, they're all not evidence for anything. I mean, clearly, this isn't a good way of thinking if something as obvious as evidence as that isn't counted as evidence. I mean,
the fine-tuning argument is basically comparable to finding 10 dice that were already rolled and now show something like 2, 4, 6, 1, 6, 4, 5, 2, 2, 1. And then you say, oh, the odds of that specific outcome were 1 in 60 million, so we can dismiss chance as an explanation. Oh no, theists and some others then say, we should compare this to 10 dice all rolling a 6 at the same time. Oh really? Why would these 10 sixes be so special? Rolling 10 sixes is only special if we presuppose the existence of someone who assigned value to throwing all these sixes before rolling the dice. That's the only scenario in which 10 sixes would be more special than any other random outcome. By analogy, life-permitting physical constants are only special compared to any other outcome of physical constants if we presuppose the existence of someone who assigned value to life before the physical constants of the universe got their values. In other words, this argument first needs to presuppose the existence of a god in order to prove the existence of a god. And if we do not presuppose the existence of a god, then life is not more or less special than any other outcome, which means that any random outcome of physical constants is equally likely and equally special, which makes chance an excellent explanation, which destroys the idea of fine-tuning. Alex, the fine-tuning argument is circular. I think not enough people are talking about this, and too many people, like yourself, Alex.
What makes the stars spelling out the phrase God exists any more special than any other phrase unless we already assign value to it? You see the problem here? I mean, clearly fine-tuning, like, matter wouldn't even exist without several different constants all falling in the exact narrow range. Clearly, there's something like molecules wouldn't even form. Clearly, that all just can't be chance. Dozens and dozens of constants all falling in the same small range can't just be chance, or at least chance is not actually that good of an explanation for that when you consider just how small that range is. I mean, how do you even do a probability calculation of anything if you have this logic?
We should also keep in mind that we want to take a holistic approach to the evidence. So even if for any particular piece of evidence you can find some alternative hypothesis which would explain it, maybe even would explain it slightly better than theism, it may still be the case that theism offers the best, most elegant, most unifying explanation of a broad diversity of data, like fine-tuning, consciousness, the existence of moral agents, psychophysical harmony, the fact that there's a contingent universe at all, various things like that.
I think maybe a lot of people just underestimate the strength of this great tradition of natural theology and some of the arguments that it has at its helm.
I mean, I'm with you there.
It really goes on and on. Alex O'Connor and Joe Schmidt just summing up all these silly Christian arguments that prove nothing, creating an atmosphere of validation, while ignoring the fact that all these arguments they mention have been utterly debunked a million times.
How has psychophysical harmony been debunked? I mean, this argument isn't even that popular. I haven't really seen that much actual debunking of it, or if there is, I don't know about it. So this video it doesn't really have much substance. I mean, he's just saying the arguments have been debunked without actually providing any reason. The only reasoning he gave was for the fine-tuning argument, and it wasn't good reasoning. It was just not good reasoning at all. So I don't really know what the point of this video is. I can't even tell if this is a parody or not, because it's like just so over dramatic about Alex O'Connor just not even just lightly criticizing some atheist talking points. So I don't really get it.